Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's had a nice day yesterday. My name is Kevin Yu. I am I serve on the EWB USA National as a national member, serving on the Health and Safety Committee. I focus on the Southeast region, reviewing health and safety plans and providing recommendations on travel team health and safety issues. Today's talk, I'm going to talk about health and safety prep for assessment trips. I'm not sure how many of you are actually in the assessment phase of your projects, so I'm hoping this will be a very good preparation for you to think about. My co-presenter, Michael Goldman, unfortunately is not able to make it today. However, I did include his contact information in this presentation at the end of it, so if you had questions later on, you feel free to email myself or him. Okay, so we're going to go over, here's our brief agenda. We're going to go over the purpose and scope of the health and safety plan, where you will talk about the process of the HASP, the actual document itself, project task hazards, what to look out for while you're actually doing assessment. So you're going to go out there and you're going to say, okay, great, I'm ready to do this project. I can do this calculation. This looks perfect. But if you don't consider the health and safety aspects, it's going to be a difficult implementation. Talk about some thoughts on how to actually do hazard reduction, some considerations, issues, medical and security issues. I know everyone's heard about the Ebola outbreaks and the security issues across the world. We want you to be safe and healthy out in the field, so we will make sure that we go over all that during the review process. And we'll also talk about emergency procedures on the implementation side and assessment side. So there's a lot of stuff on the EWB website for health and safety. Many different topics are being covered: construction, travel, health and medicine, security, actually the actual nitty-gritty of writing the health and safety plan, what hazards to look out for, and this presentation on actually how to prepare for looking at health and safety. A lot of these are modules on the website. All you have to do is go to the website and download it and review the different components. So, health and safety. You see this nice cartoon character with a guy climbing a ladder, wearing a hard hat, and fall protection. So he's actually pretty healthy, or he's being safe in being able to climb up, assuming the situation's there. The purpose of a health and safety plan is to recognize, evaluate, and control hazards. Those are the three main components that we want you to focus on. We want you to recognize potential hazards associated with each task during the assessment. So I'm not sure who's doing the assessment right now. Okay, what's your project? Yeah.
So one of the ones we're looking at doing is an energy project in Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Some solar panels and some energy distribution systems for, I guess, a school and a hospital.
Okay, so in that situation, what kind of hazards do you think have you done an assessment trip yet or not?
No, we just submitted the final one.
Okay, so take a step. What do you think is going to be, just saying the word solar panel and electricity, what do you think could be hazards out there?
Well, so there's definitely like shock hazard, there's fall hazard for unsawing of things if we're putting them up on roofs.
Mm-hmm.
There's like lifting hazards because solar panels are big and heavy, things
Right.
like that. There could potentially be some material safety hazards if you were like drop one and break it or something like that.
Okay.
Trying to remember what the other stuff is. Those are the big ones I remember.
Good. So that's when you're getting ready for the implementation side, right? So take it one step further back on the assessment side. When you're out there, you can say, hey, there's a lot of tree cover. Do we have to clear trees? If you have to clear trees, then you got to start thinking about how do we cut the trees down. Is a lot of bumpy areas. When you're out there doing the assessment, when you're traveling things around, one of the things you want to think about is slips, trips, and falls. Are you going to be able to carry solar panels around while you're walking? Because you can't see where you're going. That type of thing. We want you to start recognizing your work environment and evaluating what actually could go wrong if you were to implement this project. We don't want you getting hurt. We don't want want you to be paranoid. We want you to be aware of what the issues are. So there are different sorts of hazards out there. We have physical, such as machinery, slips, trips, and falls, weather, radiation, noise. I hope you don't see a whole lot of radiation out there. If you do, that's a whole different discussion on the health and safety side. But the major ones, slips and falls, noise, machinery, all that can be included as a physical hazard. We have biological hazards. A lot of the countries that you guys are traveling to, poisonous plants, animals, insects, they're all out there. Viruses, bacteria, waterborne issues. I know a lot of the health and safety plans say you're going to use bottled water, and because of the stagnant water that's out there, we want to make sure you're not drinking water that should not be consumed. Oh, and at any time, if there's a question, feel free to stop me, or if I'm going too fast, let me know so I can step back and answer questions. Other health and safety issues, you got chemicals, dust, vapors, gases. How many of you plan on using concrete in your projects? Concrete is a corrosive material, and if you don't want to inhale the dust, so there's a lot of mitigation steps you can take to make sure that you are protecting your team as well as your community. So, evaluation. What hazards do an environment and task present? Before you even walk around the site, and I know you're going to be very interested in talking to the community and getting really just boots to the ground and start walking around and moving around, take a step back, stop and evaluate what hazards do you see. You look at something and say, okay, we plan on putting solar panels up on a roof. Okay, can we actually put a ladder on that roof? Can that roof support someone? How many kids do we have running around? Are the kids going to be interested in climbing the ladder to get on the roof? That sort of discussion has to occur not only within the team, but also with the community. Then once you evaluate what hazards are present, you look at control methods. And there's different levels, and in order, actually. These are the OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Agency, has provided, as well as other health and safety professionals in the industry, have come up with 5 different levels, different tiers of evaluation and controls. So the best thing to do is, if you have a hazard, is to eliminate it. Just flat out. If you can eliminate the hazard, that'd be perfect. If you can't eliminate it due to infrastructure or whatever, substitution. Is there another way of approaching the same project or the same task without mitigating the hazards a lot faster? Engineering controls. If you can't do substitution, you do engineering controls, such as putting fence up or putting exclusion zones for dust. That type of stuff is engineering control. You do any fans or you spray water if you're using concrete, and if it's a very dry area, you want to make sure you keep that dust level down. Administrative controls, you just say, okay, people don't go to this area. This is my safe zone. You don't want to cross into here. It's just going to cause you a problem. And then finally, the very last line. Everyone talks about putting on hard hats, gloves and boots and all that stuff. The PPE side of things is actually the very last line of defense. That should never be your first line of defense when you're considering health and safety. It's the most visible, because you're the ones walking around with this PPE on, but it should be the last line of defense. Does anyone know why? Or anyone have an idea of why? I know it's 8:45, almost 9 o'clock in the morning, so but. Anyone have an idea? Anyone? I wouldn't say failed. It's just that there's no way of getting around it. You can't get around it. So PPE, because the hazard is still there. You're never going to get away from it. So PPE is just there to make sure that if you have something exposed, you don't actually you could potentially cause hazard. So PPE or cause an injury to yourself. So PPE is there to make sure that that's the last barrier between you and injury. So which one do you think is the most effective, though, out of all these, just in general? Elimination, right? But which do you think is most likely to be used at EWB sites? What was that? Okay, why is that? I mean, there's really no real right answer. I just want to see what your thoughts are. So why do you think administrative?
Because that's relatively easy to do. With engineering controls, you need to think of a different approach in terms of different materials you need or equipment to keep yourself safe. But administrative, you can put up cones or you can keep the safe zone or stuff like that.
Okay.
It's easier.
Okay. Great. Anyone else have any input? Yes.
I would think substitution.
Okay.
Pretty common, just because it's like if you recognize the risk, and kind of your first instinct is, okay, how can we do it differently?
Right.
Let's come up with something else that we can do that's less risky.
Okay. Good. All right. So now that we introduced some sort of higher level hazard recognition type of stuff, health and safety plans within EWB. So these are just generally the steps that we ask you to go through. The team develops it. EWB, the Health and Safety Committee, has provided a template for the chapters to use and the teams to use. But we don't know what your specific projects are. So that's where we rely on you to actually develop your own health and safety plan. It's also a good thing because you're the ones putting input into it. You're the ones who think about what's going on out there. So then you should be able to put the right thoughts into what should go into this health and safety plan. Then you're looking at this health and safety plan. You draft it up, send it to an EWB subject matter expert. If it's a solar power project, you send it to one person in EWB. It's a water project. I know like Peter Waugh is a very good water resource. He can go look at that type of information. Roads and construction. There's different people within EWB who are subject matter experts that you can go to. If you don't know, contact myself, contact Michael, contact anyone within the Health and Safety Committee. We'll direct you to the right people to be able to help you evaluate that. Once you have a draft written up, you distribute the information to the other project team members before signing the waivers to make sure everyone's on the same page. We don't want someone signing a waiver form and saying, okay, I'm ready to go travel, if they don't know what the hazards are. If they feel that they're unsafe or uncomfortable with the hazards, then we don't want people signing things that they don't have to sign if they don't feel comfortable doing it. But that's also an indicator that if they're uncomfortable, there might be a process that you need to review. You want to look at the emergency review the emergency procedures. Who do you contact if something goes wrong? Do you contact the local hospital? Is there a local hospital available? If there's a security issue, is it police force? Is there do you contact a university or your check-in person with the chapter? Those are the types of emergency procedures that we want you to go over. Know the phone numbers, know where to find information, and know that the health and safety plan is there to help just quickly, as a quick reference for you to go and say, here, something goes wrong, these are procedures we have to follow. Then we do follow-up at the back end to see what actually happened, doing a root cause analysis if something does occur. Once that's all said and done, then you review it with you want to demonstrate the understanding of health and safety with your EWB project manager. It's also good for future TAC reviews. So you want to go to the EWB PM and say, look, we know what we're doing out here. We're very confident that these are the right procedures that we need to take to ensure that our team is healthy and safe out in the field. If they don't feel that warm fuzzy within them to actually that you've actually done a thorough discussion on health and safety, they will actually deny you travel. The health and safety plan is actually an integral part of the approval process. So if you don't have a thorough, well thought out health and safety plan, even for assessment, the PM can say no to your travel. And also when you get past the assessment phase and into implementation, the health and safety reviewer, such as myself, if we say you are declined travel, even though your technical component is flawless, if we say your health and safety is lacking and we feel that the team is not taking a very safe approach to the project, we have the responsibility to the team and to the organization to deny travel. But there's also gray area. There's different areas we can say yes, you're approved, but you need to answer some questions. You're on hold, et cetera. But just know that there is the health and safety plan and the health and safety component of your project is an integral component for approval. Also, HASPs are evergreen documents. How many in here have actually written a HASP for their travel side or for their projects? Okay, a number of you, great. How many of you have just written the document once and said, okay, we're approved, and you just put the HASP aside and say, we're done, we've done that already? I hope none of you raised your hands. Okay, good. We want the health and safety plans to be an evergreen document. That means you always review it. You review it, and make sure that you modify it as this condition changes. So let's say your project is working on building a new structure on site, like some sort of building for a community center. And during the assessment phase, the ground was already leveled, everything's good to go, but then you go back for your implementation and you note that there was a landslide. The ground is no longer level. You have to do additional work to make sure the ground is leveled up before you even start building. At that point, what I would say is take a step back, reevaluate your health and safety plan. Does what you are planning to do are the activities that you plan on doing in line with what's the current site conditions? If you need to level the ground, have you written that into your health and safety plan? So we want you to review it. Look at the conditions that may have occurred out in the site, and then go back and change it. Yes?
Do the subject matter experts that review these plans, do you follow the projects, and after they've done their assessment, do you contact them to see if conditions have changed, or is the onus on the project manager?
The onus is on the project manager. It's also on the team, because we have, there's only like 20 or 30 health and safety reviewers for the entire organization. There's a lot of projects going on, a lot of different countries, a lot of different types of projects, and we can't know all the details at all times. Ideally, we would say, look at the subject matter experts should go back and once in a while, maybe if they're associated with a project, they should definitely check in. But if it's a project that the team has developed and they're nowhere near the subject matter expert's location, the recommendation is just contact them, get their information, contact them, and work out any condition changes that may have occurred. Any other questions so far? Okay. So now we look at the actual health and safety plan itself. So the health and safety plan is broken into multiple sections. It's a template that you can download from the website, and it spells out exactly the instructions on what you need to fill out, how you fill it out, and it's pretty boilerplate, but it requires some thought to make sure that you address all the issues that may occur. It organizes any vaccinations, task hazards, biohazards, security issues, procedures for responses. Also gives some brief description on the project, as well as what is going on out there. So the first three sections, the three big sections that really should be a field, everyone should know in the field, is the emergency contact page. Who do you contact? What if you can't reach that person? Who's the next person you want to contact? The health checklist. This is important because some people are allergic to things that the other team members aren't aware of. The health checklist, what that does, it provides the health and safety officer within the team to be aware of what medications people are taking if there's an allergic reaction to bee stings or to insects, or if there's if they have to carry an EpiPen with them for issues, if there is they've had other ailments that may impact the response to medical care. Additionally, in MAPS medical facilities, a lot of the projects are middle of nowhere, and you're a good 4.5 hours, 5 hours driving from the major city to that area. Is the closest medical facility really located at the major population center, or is there something closer that can respond, even though they don't have the full capabilities of what's in the city? Is there something a lot closer, maybe an hour away, that if there's a broken leg, they can put some quick antibiotics and set your leg and make sure that you're good to go? Is it something? Are there airlift procedures? Is there a place that they have to get airlifted out of? You got to know those locations to be able to tell people where to go if there's an issue. And a lot of these things that I'm going over right now, we can go into more detail. When you get into the health and safety plan itself, you'll see that there's a lot of different components that need to be addressed. So if there's any questions later on, feel free to contact anyone within the Health and Safety Committee. So while you're doing the assessment trip, what should you look out for? How many of you can actually read every single thing on that slide? Because when I was putting this thing together, I was like, wow, I forgot how many task hazards there really are associated in the health and safety plan. And it was definitely a small font. But there's a lot of things in here that you should be on the lookout for. A lot of things may not apply, such as lockout, tagout, or landmines. Generally, no, but consider all these different aspects, all these different components that could be occurring on your site. So, with your project on solar panels, when you're doing your assessment trip, you can be looking at inclement weather. You're looking at heat stress, cold stress, foot care, hot work. If you have to do any cutting, if you have to do rough terrain, you're walking around, housekeeping, working at elevation and fall protection, ladders, electrical safety, et cetera, et cetera. So all those different things can actually tie into what you're doing out there. For the assessment health and safety plan, you don't have to worry specifically about these tasks, but when you're out there doing the assessment on the actual trip, these are things you should look out for. So there's two different phases. So the actual assessment health and safety plan is just general safety, going out there, slips, trips, and falls, inclement weather, heat stress, rough terrain, et cetera. When you take that information, you do your assessment trip, think about what you're doing and what could go wrong. What my personal preference is that if you're on a travel team, I would have you're in an assessment phase, have a health and safety officer develop the health and safety plan. Have that person contact an EWB representative, the health and safety committee representative. Have them go through the health and safety plan. Put some comments in, because even though the reviewer is not giving the okay, the approval, and the PM is, that person should still be associated with what you're doing, because more than likely that person will help you continue building your health and safety plan on the implementation side. So starting the process really early really early on will only benefit the team. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Like, you start the process early. The earlier you start the process, the easier it is to focus more on your technical side than it is on the health and safety side. A lot of teams I know that I've done reviews for, it looks like what they did was they did their technical review, everything's all, okay, great, we had this great calculation, the design drawings are awesome. Oh, wait, we have to do the health and safety plan. Oh, quick, let's just put something together real quick. As a result, the quality suffers. And there's a higher chance that someone could get hurt because they're not quite aware of what's going on. So if you start the health and safety process a lot earlier and work your way through, and actually my recommendation is to talk to your task leaders, those who are in charge of monitoring construction, monitoring the overall process, have them think about health and safety during the whole development process, provide that input back to your health and safety officer so that that information can be put into the health and safety plan, and then do a final polish before sending it off to the reviewer so that you're not scrambling at the last minute. Okay, so now we look at this hazard reductions. We talked about all these hazards that are out there, and we have different layers. So this is what I've been taught as is called the Swiss cheese model. The weaknesses in different steps are considered holes. So your hazard is way on the left-hand side. As you go through each layer, if you don't take care of those holes, you don't fill them in, there's a potential that that hazard can sneak right through everything you're doing and you run into an accident. The different levels, such as being protective barriers, all those different things that we talked about earlier, elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE. So all that are these different layers of cheese. But the smaller the holes, the less chance a hazard will become an accident or illness or injury. And so what we ask each team to do is to develop a plan that understands, implements a plan, understands the issues, plan out the mitigation components, and then implement them in the field. We want you to research what you're doing out there, figure out what processes and design considerations that need to occur. So if you're mixing concrete for a building or for some sort of structure, do you mix it right in the middle of the town and you just let dust fly all over the place, or do you mix in one area and wheel it to in a downwind area and then wheel the mixed concrete up to where you need to go, so that you're preventing dust hazards from impacting your community? Physical barriers. Do you have a building that you can put everything into? Can you do work within a building, or you have to bring some caution tape to just kind of rope off the area and say, hey, no one can cross this line? And finally, PPE. Do we need gloves? Do we need safety glasses, boots, long pants? What kind of boots? Do you have sturdy work boots are good enough? Hiking boots are good enough? Sneakers? Definitely no flip-flops if you're doing construction. Gloves, are they chemically compatible with what you're doing out there? Simple latex gloves may not be the best thing to work with when you're dealing with concrete. Work gloves, nitrile gloves. There's a lot of different resources out on the internet that you can download for chemical compatibility between glove material and what you're doing out there. If you're using PVC cement, you obviously don't want to have just bare hands. You want to use the proper gloves. How do you get rid of that stuff? Do you just bag all that garbage up and then dispose of it? Where? That's a consideration that we have to think about as well. Because you don't want the community to eventually just throw it out somewhere and it could cause a problem elsewhere. Generally, hard barriers are more reliable than soft barriers, but all ultimately rely on people. So again, health and safety is not just you and the team. It is you, the team, and the community, and anyone else you associate with, any contractors that you're working with. So when you're developing these health and safety plans, put that thought into it as well. Who are you going to be working with? When you're making your assessment trips, do you need a contractor? If you need a contractor, are you sure that person is the right one to do the work? Will they follow health and safety? Do they feel like they're just going to be mavericks and be able to say, we've done this a million times, we know what we're doing, we don't care about your health and safety plan, we're just going to do it? Is that the type of contractor you want to work on the site? Or is it someone that you can say, okay, yeah, we can definitely help you out. Tell us what we need to do. Are you going to provide us with some help, gloves and hard hats or whatever, and we'll provide the labor and make sure that we work safely and work with you. Those are the types of things you have to think about when working with different people. But again, health and safety relies on people. It's not just a hard hat is a hard hat, but it doesn't do any good if you're not wearing it. So it's all about behaviors. Okay, switching gears real quick, we'll talk about medical issues, medical considerations. Again, everyone's heard about Ebola, malaria, and other sort of issues that are out there. Big ones, anything spread by mosquitoes, such as malaria, dengue fever, etc. Are all medical issues that we have to consider out in the field. Especially if we're doing work in jungles, if we're doing work in remote areas, these are big issues because you don't know if how fast a medical response can occur. So you're looking at vaccinations, medications. Make sure you bring the right medication with you. Everyone's all vaccinated before you leave. Looking at biological hazards, snakes, parasites, etc. How many of you are working at elevation, as in high elevation? Okay, so again, dehydration, altitude sickness, those are big deals. We've actually had a couple cases with an EWB of dehydration and altitude sickness, and so those people had to be brought back down to a lower elevation, hydrated, monitored, and they could not participate in the rest of the project because they had to get themselves back in healthy condition. You want to make sure you have the right training. If you're near a population center, maybe just standard basic first aid is all you need. But if you are in the middle of nowhere, wilderness first aid is also another step that you could take. It goes into it's a lot more rigorous than basic first aid training. And it's offered out there. You have to look it up, and there is a fee associated with it. But you can probably get a really good trainer to go through wilderness first aid, and they go through a lot more. How many of you have actually done the wilderness first aid? So is it a lot more intense than basic first aid? Exactly. So I was supposed to go to wilderness first aid back in May, but unfortunately my schedule conflicted, so I wasn't able to go. But would have loved to have done it because I think it's actually a very useful tool. The health checklist, as I mentioned earlier, that's a big thing. It's all about knowledge. Knowledge is key. Knowledge is power. So if you have good knowledge about your team and your community, that only helps you. And again, maps of medical facilities. Security. So security is a big deal. We've had a number of cases with an EWB where the teams travel and they got mugged, robbed. People lost their, they had their wallets, their passports sitting near the top of their bags in easy accessible areas. They weren't paying attention. Security is a big deal because you have to then go through a whole bunch of different steps to get back all that information, all that stuff, and make sure you're actually safe on all that. ISOS, we have a partnership with ISOS as an international assistance. They have good summaries on if you go to a different country like Panama or El Salvador, Nicaragua, Liberia, Zimbabwe, other countries out there. They have lots of different summaries, and they provide basic idea, give you some good background on what the current conditions are as of that date, what you can do to prevent issues from occurring. The U.S. State Department also has warnings as well. All this stuff is public information, nothing's hidden, so just look it up. Again, the EWB website as well as the HASP template has links to all this information. Emergency contacts, check-in methods. Here's a statistic that I found pretty interesting. There's risk of kidnapping, but it's very, very small. So it's a very small percentage. What is that, like 0.08% or so, of people are actually kidnapped. But a lot of people out there aren't really there to, really cause harm. All they really want is your money. So petty theft and robberies are far more common. So I don't have the actual statistic on that, but again, if you just give them the money, they'll probably just let you go. more than likely. So or they know that you're an American, you have this invisible magnet that just kind of, people just know you're American, and they know you have money. So there's a chance that you're going to have a lot more issues. So again, yes, sorry.
U.S. State Department has country lines. Does the ISOS summary go into a more regional within the state?
Yes. Yeah. They do. They actually have a lot of, they work with groups like EWB and other international development firms, or different development organizations to actually go through all this. Yes?
Speaking of that, I just recently did a trip to Ecuador, and so like in ISOS they had a rating throughout the entirety of the country, and then they said like Quito and Guayaquil were like slightly higher risk, and they said like the northern border ones were very high risk, and they went into more details over the specific risks for those high risk areas. So it's really nice to use.
Right. So even if you don't, even outside of EWB, if you're traveling to a different country, these are good websites to go just to look over anyway. So just as a recommendation to go over all that. Yeah.
So we're traveling to a country, obviously we're not going to bring a lot of money in cash or anything like that. But what
Right.
about cameras for recording or cell phones to keep in contact? Or what do you recommend we take in that thing?
Keep a low profile, as low as you can. I mean, work with people that you're familiar with. Don't travel by yourself. Don't rent vehicles for your own. The team should not be renting a vehicle to drive themselves. They should be hiring a respected or a reputable driver, because those people know where to go and to go around different areas. As the outsider, you don't know where you're going, really. So you could be driving through an area that really you shouldn't be driving through. So the recommendation is never to have your own vehicle to drive, because then it's also a liability issue and all that stuff. So, so for cameras and whatnot, again, low profile, keep it hidden until you get to the community. And just don't make it obvious make it as obvious, I should say. And get to know people within your community, and they can go with you to these different areas and that may be higher risk, they can help you navigate around. Yes?
I would say just recognize the minimum requirements that you need, like housing or just what you need to bring back from the trip so that you can
Right.
have the lowest quality of equipment that you can.
Exactly. Yeah. Just bare minimum. I mean, if you need just a couple pictures for recording purposes, bring a cheap point and shoot camera, or I haven't seen one in a while, but those disposable cameras. Seriously, just bring disposable cameras and process film. I mean, that might be cheaper than not. Those cameras cost like $15, and that's a lot cheaper than carrying a nice SLR camera that has this nice resolution, all that. If you don't need that, don't bring it. Any other questions? Any comments? Yes.
Just on the camera issue, it's important sometimes to understand what the rules are about camera use in the place you're going.
Right.
We go to camera, and it's actually against the rules to take pictures of public facilities. Like, people are not supposed to take a picture of City Hall.
Okay.
Something like that. And so
See, that's good information to know. Yeah, just know your local regulations on what you can and can't do out there.
In many countries, do not take pictures of bridges,
Right.
stations,
Big public areas where, yeah. And I think that's one of those things where I would contact, if there's a U.S. embassy in that area, contact them first, get the information. Again, information is key, is power out there. So if you know what's going on out there, you can better prepare yourself before making that trip. Okay, I think I've got, a little bit more time. All right, so I don't know why that second photo did not show up, but so these are just screenshots of what the different websites look like. I apologize, that middle slide should be showing an ISOS slide, but for some reason it's not. So emergency procedures, what should you do? Something goes wrong, what do you do? Inform your team health and safety officer right away. We want to make sure that you're responding, that your team the person who's responsible for health and safety out there is aware of what's going on. You want to evaluate the situation. Does this person break their leg? Is this just a scratch? Is it, is there a spill somewhere? Those are the types of things you have to evaluate. Determinative contacts need to be made with EWB USA. Again, for the assessment side, hopefully nothing happens out there that's going to really require a major issue. However, there are potential issues where you slip, you fall while you're walking around. I mean, these are the types of things you should be prepared for within your health and safety plan on the assessment trip. So determinative contact needs to be made with EWB USA and or the university. Depending on what your university regulations are, what their rules are, you may need to contact them right away. Contact ISOS or the U.S. Embassy in the area. If it's that bad of a situation, let's say you got robbed, you've lost your passport, that type of thing. Follow emergency procedures flowchart, which is included as part of the template, so you'll see all the information, but oops, for some reason that didn't show up. Blame the Mac. But unfortunately, there's a slide that, this slide actually should have shown the flow chart that is in all the health and safety plans. That should be in there. So unfortunately, it's not showing up, so I don't know what the situation is. But all right. So does anyone have any questions so far? Or that's essentially the presentation. Yes.
I had a question about when we're trying to implement our projects.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our projects are kind of like miniature projects of existing systems in the States, and they have health and safety protocols for bigger projects.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we can, to what scale we should follow those health and safety rules. For example, when we're maybe digging a hole, over here they would dig bigger, deeper holes, and so they need certain safety things, but
Mm-hmm.
we can't find those kind of resources for small scale projects.
How deep do you think you're going?
I'm not really sure. I'm not in that part of the project.
Okay.
I know that's a concern because it's hard for them to find the resources to know how to prepare for things like that.
Okay. Again, that's a discussion with, if you contact your EWB PM, they can put you in touch with someone within the Health and Safety Committee that can help you directly with the questions. So if you have, let's say you contact me directly, you can then say, hey Kevin, here's my situation. I'd ask you questions of how deep are you going? What size of the area are you digging out? What is the purpose of it? What kind of soils do you have out there? That would help develop what you would need to do out there. But again, as part of the assessment trip, maybe what you want to do is, again, take some geotechnical samples, take some soil back, if you can. I mean, I'm not sure what the travel regulations are on that, depending on the country, but you could take some soil samples back, get them tested to evaluate will you need shoring, is the sloping is enough, or are you going only 2 feet deep, or are you going 10 feet deep, And so that also, it's a very open-ended question depending on what you're doing out there.
Well, I think they have the necessary information, like we have the soil samples and the dimensions, but what's hard is that we can't find the resources that tell us what we need, because just the scale is so different for people who actually do build these things in the States.
Okay. Yeah, I would recommend contacting, if you're in the assessment phase, contact the PM. The PM can talk to a TAC member or a health and safety member. If you're on the implementation side already, talk to your regional TAC, and they can still put you in touch with a health and safety person. So always use the resources you have available. Yes?
Is there like a set of procedures for the check-in contacts to follow here in the U.S.? Because I know we recently did a trip to Ecuador and we had a problem where we were basically outside of communication range. We had very, very limited cell contact, only at certain points on the site.
Right.
And there was a major earthquake that happened in Quito.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the families in the U.S. heard about it and were getting concerned and trying to get in contact with us. And the check-in contact back in the States didn't exactly know what to do or how to handle it.
Right. So in the health and safety plan, it says what your check-in contact procedures are. That's up to the team to develop. Okay. If you know you have very spotty reception, my recommendation is get a satellite phone. You can rent one. It does add cost to the project, but you know what? I personally would rather chip in a couple $100 to rent the phone to make sure that the team is safe than not. I mean, that's just me personally, but you know.
The check-in contact knew that we were like all okay, but he was getting lots of calls from like concerned parents. He didn't know if he was supposed to like reach back to them and tell like everyone that we were okay, or like what he was supposed to do.
They can do that. I mean, if that check-in person is comfortable doing that, they can let them know that, hey, I was in contact with the team yesterday. After everything occurred, they told me what's going on. Everything's fine, and that the team is all healthy. There's no injuries. They can do that. I would also recommend the check-in contact person let EWB know what happened, so that we're not getting called a whole bunch of times. You know, and we don't know. So just that check-in person is really a critical person in the chain of communication. So make sure that person is comfortable with actually giving information.
I just want to agree, you definitely weren't prepared for that contingency.
Right. Yeah. I mean, earthquake. Who's ever prepared for an earthquake, right? Yes.
I was wondering if anybody has any anecdotes on the balance between when your community is doing labor for you and they're saying this is the way we've always done it, and when you say, no, you have to follow my standards or something that, you know, is there a certain point at which you break the job? Shoveling and foot
Yes.
We always try, I mean, we really run some hard lines, like traditional practice, there's no such thing as flying ground. You get large rocks, you set cameras for endless hours and breaking these small rocks. And so we always bring lots of safety glasses, work gloves, and insist that those people are going to wear this stuff. We are going to move them in a segregated area where the chips fly 20 feet, it's not a problem. And we really try to work that. Make some time before and after there. And we have enough people who show up to work and get us something.
It's again communication and understanding. You know, at the outset, especially during the assessment phase, you can say, look, you know, if we're going to be doing, you know, if we're going to help you build this thing, we need to have you understand that you're going to help follow our procedures to help make sure you're safe. That could be part of the memo of understanding, the MOU. Just write that in there somewhere and say, hey, you know, the community agrees to abide by, you know, health and safety procedures to ensure that no one gets injured. You know, I used to do work for a large oil and gas company, and their motto was nobody gets hurt. And that's like the simplest thing you could do about what this whole program is. Nobody gets hurt. We don't want anyone. I don't want to report saying, yeah, we were driving this ATV around and you know, oh, we're real close to a cliff and that person went over the edge. It's like, why were you even riding an ATV? And then why were you riding an ATV on a cliff? You know, I've actually read reports about people riding vehicles and they got themselves injured because they weren't prepared. They thought oh yeah, the health and safety plan is written, whatever. It's just a checklist item and it's done. Then they go ahead and do something different and something goes wrong. It's a liability issue. It's a liability thing with EWB as well. We don't want our team members getting injured because that could cause a problem within, you know, something a legal aspect. What happens within the organization? Any other questions, comments? Yes.
So, like, obviously you have a first aid kit for, you know, someone on the team gets hurt or gets sexually tested.
Yes.
What do you do if, like, someone in the community, like a contractor, someone that's been working for you, gets hurt on site? Like, are you not supposed to give them first aid, or should you help them until, like, local authorities can get there, or, like, procedure for that? When we were there, we had a local contractor that was, like, riding a motorcycle into work, and he fell and got really bad road burn on the side of his leg.
Right.
And, like, he did, like, bandages on his leg, basically.
Right. That's a very good question. I have not run into that. I can look into it. Anyone have any input into that? Yes.
I know we've had like, you know, one of the community members, like just gets like a small, you know, scratch or something, and like, oh, we'll give them like a Band-Aid or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not antibiotic, but like Neosporin or something.
Right.
But other than that, I guess that's like as far as do you have anything you don't want to do with that. So.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
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 From a legal standpoint, most states have good Samaritan laws. When you give first aid to someone, you're not necessarily super liable. But I'm not really sure, and it probably would depend on the country you're going to. I'd imagine it'd be fine, but they probably have some sort of similar laws in place.
I mean, if the person's obviously bleeding out, do what you need to, do what you need to do to make sure the guy's okay and get help right away. But you're right, it was just small things like that. That's a gray area. You had a comment?
In many countries, people would not think of suing somebody who's trying to help them.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Right, exactly. We're not.
I want to mention that one issue is safety standards, local safety standards that locals use, and also some people that we work with outside of EWB, for instance, from NGO,
Mm-hmm.
or actually some EWB members. And I've seen a situation like last year I worked with Masons from Philadelphia, who are volunteers working for the NGO. They're not part of EWB, and you have to use some influence without authority to convince them, because one of them got, let's say, a cut or a scratch, a bleeding scratch, and had some iodine.
Mm-hmm.
It took some convincing to clean up the wound. I said, this is a dirty place, you can get an infection.
Right.
But we were perceived as twins. We were so, obsessed with all those rules, and that they're top guys, Masons, they work construction.
Right.
We were in the office most of the time. We go to a construction site every once in a while. That's one situation. Another situation, I work with some EWB members who are experienced engineers, run their own businesses, and the same situation. Well, I get cuts on my job all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I never use iodine or bandage or anything, and I have no authority to order them to. So I have to.
You convince them it's in their best interest that you don't want to have infection or whatever, right? Yeah, it can be a hard challenge. I mean, but they say no, no, no. I mean, you can't force it on them, so, right? So, any other comments, questions? So I hope everyone has a better idea of while you're doing the assessment trip, make the trip, but keep health and safety in your mind at all times. Not just while you're there, but also looking out for future aspects. For your implementation side, implementation's got a lot of health and safety as well, but the assessment is where it starts. It's also a place where you can start developing your background. Your health and safety plan template or your draft is going to be your baseline for the rest of your project, your rest of your program. So, make sure it's a good, solid draft. Once you put the background in there and some of the key features, a lot of that is carried over into the next phase. So it's just adding on. So it helps if you look at the assessment, do a very good assessment, not just on the technical aspect, but on health and safety aspect, and then incorporate everything so that your implementation side is actually a lot smoother. So with that, contact information for myself and Michael are on the screen. I'm more than happy to stay for a couple extra minutes if you have any questions or any further comments. But thank you very much for coming, and hope you guys had a rest of a good conference.